I feel extremely blessed to have been born here in Canada, a country where my boyfriend and I can live together without fear of retaliation. As a gay man, I most definitely won the lottery because LGBTQ+ people around the world face violence, inequality, and even torture and execution, all because of who they are or who they love. Making a video about LGBTQ+ rights in the world is extremely complicated because of the wildly different approaches taken by countries in the world in support or in opposition to LGBTQ+ rights. For instance, a country might support LGBTQ+ rights on the world stage, but has yet to legalize same-sex marriage. Italy, for instance. On the contrary, some countries made same-sex intercourse illegal and punishable with prison time, but allegedly won't enforce it. So, to make sense of it all, in this video, we will start by looking at the big picture on the world stage and slowly narrow it down to specific laws regarding same-sex unions. We will also touch on trans rights, and we'll finish with a few case studies of interest, including the worst country in the world for LGBTQ+ rights. So if you like that type of content, make sure to subscribe to the channel. You can also like this video to help other people join the conversation, and I'm very excited to read all your comments. A good place to start our research is at the United Nations because it's a little more clear-cut. Member states either support, oppose, or did not take position on the LGBTQ+ rights declaration in the National Assembly or on the Human Rights Council. North America and South America member states support LGBTQ+ rights with a very few exceptions. Same goes with member states in Europe and Oceania. There are also notable mentions in Africa. Countries like the Central African Republic and South Africa support LGBTQ+ rights on the world stage. In Asia, you can count on Mongolia, Japan, and South Korea, among other honorable mentions. It's also worth noting that Italy supports LGBTQ+ rights, but the Holy See's permanent observer at the United Nations opposes them, which may have an impact on local politics. We'll talk about the role that religion plays later in this video when we take a look at our case studies. Other member states outright oppose LGBTQ+ rights, and those countries usually have a pretty bad human rights record. Most member states in Northern Africa, in the Middle East, and close-by regions oppose LGBTQ+ rights. There are also dishonorable mentions in Asia, with Indonesia, Malaysia, and North Korea all opposing LGBTQ+ rights. Most of the rest of the world did not show support for these rights at the United Nations, nor did they oppose them. So this map represents the big pictures. Some countries recognize and support LGBTQ+ rights, some countries oppose them, and some countries just don't care enough. But this map does not tell us what countries do to support or oppose LGBTQ+ rights at the national level, so it's time to dig a little deeper. Exploring laws regarding same-sex intercourse, unions, and expression can help us deepen our understanding of LGBTQ+ rights in specific countries. But we must refrain from drawing broad conclusions. For instance, living in a country where same-sex marriage is legalized does not guarantee that LGBTQ+ people live free of judgment or local persecution. The United States is a good example of this. Same-sex marriage is legal, and yet we see relentless assaults on LGBTQ+ rights at the state level, mostly in the South. I covered this topic in a previous video, so if you're ever interested, it will be linked at the end of this one. Let's take it continent by continent. In North America, Canada, Mexico, and the US all legalized same-sex marriage. In South America, same-sex marriage is legal in countries like Brazil, Argentina, and Colombia, and civil unions are legalized in Bolivia. In most of the rest of the continent, same-sex intercourse is legal, but unions are not recognized. And we have a dishonorable mention for Guyana, where same-sex intercourse is illegal and punishable with prison time, but apparently prison sentences are not enforced. Let's take a look at Europe. European countries are somewhat divided on same-sex laws despite their broad support for LGBTQ+ rights at the United Nations. Same-sex marriage is legal in the most Western countries like France, Spain, and Portugal. The United Kingdom also legalized same-sex marriage, as well as Nordic countries. Other countries like Italy and Greece recognize civil unions, but not marriage. But in most Eastern European countries, same-sex intercourse is legal, but unions are not recognized. Let's deal with Russia now because it's kind of an outlier. In Russia, same-sex intercourse is technically legal, but restrictions of expression are imposed by the government. That's why we will use Russia as a case study later in this video. Asia is another complicated area for same-sex laws. In countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Myanmar, same-sex intercourse is illegal and punishable with a prison sentence, but apparently they're not enforcing it. Somewhat similarly to Russia, same-sex intercourse is legal in China, but is the subject of government censure. As for Japan, it does not recognize same-sex marriage. The situation in Japan is kind of unique, and we will use this country as one of our case studies later in this video. And in Malaysia, same-sex intercourse is illegal and punishable with prison, arrests, or detention. This extreme approach of prison time is somewhat common in Africa. In most northern African countries, same-sex intercourse is illegal and punishable with prison, arrests, or detention. In most of the rest of the continent, same-sex intercourse is legal but not recognized, with the honorable mention of South Africa, where same-sex marriage is legal. Things get most heated in the Middle East region, with some countries going as far as punishing same-sex intercourse with the death penalty. This includes Iran and Afghanistan. We'll explore Afghanistan as a case study later in this video. So, in a snapshot, if you're a member of the LGBTQ+ community, you're more likely to live a free and safe life in a democratic country. The same general rule applies when it comes to gender identity and trans rights, although overall, trans rights are trailing behind same-sex marriage rights. We will discuss trans rights in more details when we get to our case studies. Hopefully, these maps help paint a broad portrait of LGBTQ+ rights in the world, but the overall state of these rights are more complex than what our maps can show, especially since these rights depend on both national as well as local governments and are not advancing at the same rate for everyone in the community. In addition, some countries, mostly anti-democratic countries, are not upfront about their human rights record. It's now time to look at specific countries. I wanted to dig deeper in this video to better understand the impact on people's lives. There were so many countries to choose from for different reasons, but I thought Canada, Russia, Afghanistan, and Japan were interesting to explore in this video. You'll see why. Let's start with Canada. It is my country, so I know it best. It's also a very queer-friendly place. Canada has a LGBTQ+ equality index of 84 points. This index is used to help illustrate legal rights and public opinion of the LGBTQ+ community. A score of 84 places Canada as the 5th most LGBTQ+ friendly country in the world, tied with the Netherlands. In Canada, homosexuality is legal and the community does not face government censorship. Same-sex marriage has been legal since 2005. Discrimination against the LGBTQ+ community is illegal. This includes employment and housing discrimination. Conversion therapies are also illegal in Canada. LGBTQ+ people have the right to adopt, serve in the military, and donate blood. Changing gender is also legal in Canada and does not require surgery. Non-binary genders are recognized too. Canada also welcomes a considerable number of LGBTQ+ refugees, many of whom end up here in Toronto. It's something that makes me proud to be Canadian, and organizations like Rainbow Railroad make a huge difference in the lives of these refugees. I'm always so happy to see efforts put in by many people during Pride Month to raise funds for them, including my gym, which was a welcomed surprise. But it does not mean that Canada is perfect, and we certainly cannot take our rights for granted. Even here, there are groups opposing LGBTQ+ rights, essentially opposing human rights, and we must continue to be visible and stand up for our future. I recently heard Courtney Act, who's Australian, say this on a podcast.
The conversation around drag and grooming, and I think that also then extends to trans people and sport and bathrooms and whatever else. It's all, in Australia, it's all, I think, spoken with an American accent.
And I get what she means, because I too feel like a lot of right-wing rhetoric, and that includes anti-LGBTQ+ stands, are imported concepts from America. Much like Australia, a big part of Canada has English as its first language. So it is easy to get swooped in by right-wing media coming from America. The whole panic over gender identity we witnessed recently is an American import, in my opinion. With that being said, I think Canada is on the right path overall. We're not perfect. There's still a lot of work to do to continue advancing equality, but I think we can be proud of where we stand right now as a country and where we're going. And speaking of being proud, my cousin and I are working really hard to launch our first apparel brand. We took many meetings with industry experts and are almost ready to go to market. I cannot tell you how excited I am for this project, and rest assured, you guys will be the first to know when we're ready to show anything. We are also very proud that this venture will be entirely queer-owned, which probably means that we would not be able to operate our apparel brand in a place like Russia, our second case study. Russia is of interest for this video because LGBTQ+ rights are constantly eroded, and it can take many insidious forms. First, Russia has an equality index of 28, meaning that it ranks 143rd in the world. In Russia, homosexuality is legal, but the community faces government censorship. In 2022, the Russian parliament approved a bill that widens a prohibition of what they call LGBTQ propaganda. This bill restricts demonstration of LGBTQ+ behavior of all sorts. So it's essentially illegal to demonstrate your homosexuality in public. Fun fact, by the way, Elton John tried to lobby Russia to advance LGBTQ+ rights, but plans to meet collapsed after Putin chickened out. Same-sex marriage is not legal in Russia. There are no protection for discrimination against the LGBTQ+ community. This means that members of the community may face employment and housing discrimination. Conversion therapies are not banned in Russia. LGBTQ+ people have the right to adopt, but only if they're single. Gay, lesbian, and bisexual people can serve in the military, but not transgender people. The ability to donate blood varies by region. Changing gender is illegal in Russia, and non-binary genders are not recognized. The laws in Russia are brutal for the LGBTQ+ community, but so is the social climate, and we have some data to better understand what's going on. 51% of Russians would not want a homosexual neighbor. 18% of Russians believe gays and lesbians should be eliminated from society. And I bet you some people in the comment section will agree with that. The last time I touched on LGBTQ+ rights, the comment section was filled with such sentiments. Russia is a unique case study for us, in part because of the outsized role that the Orthodox Church plays in their society. The church in Russia is extremely opposed to LGBTQ+ rights. And according to data, 80% of Orthodox Christians in Russia support the church's position of refusing to perform same-sex marriage. So yes, there's no doubt that Russia is a bad place for LGBTQ+ people, but unfortunately there are even worse places. Our third case study is the most deplorable of them all. Afghanistan has a terrible track record for human rights, and of course, this includes LGBTQ+ rights. There too, you'll see how religion plays a role in suppressing the rights of LGBTQ+ people. First, Afghanistan has an equality index of 2 and ranks dead last in the world. Homosexuality is illegal, and the death penalty is the punishment. The law states that homosexuals will suffer long imprisonments and that honor killings are encouraged. The Taliban also censure LGBTQ+ topics since it is illegal under Islamic Sharia law. So you see how religion plays a role here too. I suppose you can easily guess how these other answers go. Pause now if you want to read everything. And this climate only got worse with the recent Taliban takeover. The Human Rights Watch organization is growing increasingly worried for LGBTQ+ people in Afghanistan. Recently, they interviewed 60 LGBTQ+ Afghans, which led to a gruesome report. The overview reads, "Many reported that Taliban members attacked or threatened them because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Others reported abuse from family members, neighbors, and romantic partners who now support the Taliban or believed they had to act against LGBTQ+ people close to them to ensure their own safety. Some fled their homes from attacks by Taliban members or supporters pursuing them. Others watched lives they had carefully built over the years disappear overnight and found themselves at risk of being targeted at any time because of their sexual orientation or gender identity." Quote, "We spoke with LGBT Afghans who have survived gang rape, mob attacks, or have been hunted by their own family members who joined the Taliban, and they have no hope that state institutions will protect them," said J. Lester Fetter, Senior Fellow for Emergency Research at Outright Action International.
Brushna's parents protected her from the extended family when they learned she was a lesbian. But when the Afghan government fell, her uncle and cousins joined the Taliban and said they would kill her if her father wouldn't.
"If you're not going to do this, we will do it. We have the authority."
The family forced Brushna to marry a man. He beats her regularly and will not let her leave the house because she is a lesbian.
Researching LGBTQ+ rights in Afghanistan was horrible. There are a ton of stories like this one, but it's necessary to talk about it. It also makes me realize how fortunate I am to be born here in Canada. Growing up, my parents used to say that being born in Canada is like winning the lottery of life. And as a gay man today, I could not agree more. Finally, let's take a look at Japan. From my perspective, this is an interesting case study because Japan is progressive on some fronts and behind on others. First, Japan has an equality index of 57 and ranks 54th in the world, so it could be better. In Japan, homosexuality is legal and the community does not face government censorship, but same-sex marriage is not recognized. Discrimination against the LGBTQ+ community is illegal in some contexts only. Protections against employment discrimination vary by region, and there are no protection for housing discrimination. Conversion therapies are not banned in Japan. Adoption laws are also ambiguous because no law addresses same-sex couples adopting in Japan. LGBTQ+ people can serve in the military. They can also donate blood but must subject themselves to a 6 to 12 month deferral period. Changing gender is legal in Japan, but it requires surgery, and non-binary genders are not recognized. So Japan is kind of a mixed bag when it comes to these laws. We also know that public opinion toward LGBTQ+ people in Japan is mostly positive. 72% of voters in Japan support same-sex marriage. Polls also show good support for transgender protection against discrimination. Making this video was a journey. These maps and case studies can only tell us so much. And I'm just some guy sitting in Canada trying to understand how other LGBTQ+ people may be impacted by their identity in their home country. But at the end of the day, people provide more context about their own country than any data set. That's why I would love to hear from you. What is your perception of LGBTQ rights in your own country? I cannot wait to read all your comments below. As usual, thank you for watching. Click the top link to watch the rise of anti-LGBTQ+ politics and click the bottom link for my latest video.